Welcome to Dayton Warcry Club. I'm Warren, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Fred and Dave. Today we'll be going over the results of a number of recent competitive events in the last few weeks, including the competitive tournament at Adepticon. We'll also have our usual hobby update, cover a little bit of Warcry news, and talk about our latest upcoming local events. Hey, good evening, guys. How's it going?
Hey, so far so good.
Yeah, it's going good.
So it's been a while. It's been I think over a month since we recorded, I think, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
It feels like it. Yeah, life's been busy. Travel, we had a lot going on with work for me, but we had a lot of tournament results lately, and I had kind of the itch to kind of get something recorded here. A lot of stuff that, there hasn't been a lot of coverage from Adepticon yet. Salty had a little bit of coverage, went out yesterday, but for the most part, not a lot of coverage of the list or anything else like that, or some of the other events that went on. So, yeah. But there's quite a bit that happened that sort of led up to Adepticon, and I think we have a pretty good picture of where the state of the game is now.
Yeah, so this is not going to be battle reports from any of us. It's just going to be us kind of looking at these lists and talking about the metagame.
Yep. Well, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my Adepticon experience.
Oh, sure, you did do the narrative of that.
Because I was there.
Yes.
That's right. Warren attended.
I was going to, and then I crashed my car. So there you go. But
well, we can kind of look at it and be like, well, we know your list, and we can kind of figure out, how you might have fared against the field there.
Yep.
But but we'll also cover some hobby update. And there's a few other news items that we'll cover as well before we get into the tourney results. So this is what I played. I could not play the competitive event. I had something else the day before, but I drove up after that, got into town about 4 a.m, played the narrative event the next day. But some of these were already finished, but I completed another 6 Stormcast Warrior Chamber for the narrative event. So this is all of them kind of on my magnetic tray there. And then here's some pics I submitted to Salty Sea's painting contest of the 6 that I played. So I got a Knight Relictor, I got 3 Protectors with the long range 3-inch move, 1 Flyer, and 1 Sword guy, a Liberator with 2-handed sword. So everyone hits like a truck. Base damage 3/5 damage profiles for the most part. And it felt pretty good. I was outnumbered a little bit, but most of the guys can take a round of combat before going down. I did have one bad round where someone got spiked down from 20 down to 0, and I wound up losing that game.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, that was my first round versus the Untamed Beast, actually. Don't sleep on the Heart Eater. He is a monster.
I played against a list like this at Gen Con in 1.0, and it felt very, very good. I was surprised by how quickly the spears can kind of put those bubbles all over the board. They can spread out and just cover a ton of board with that 3-inch poke. And so it's it kind of plays a little more mobile than it looks, and I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, actually, you played Justin Smith, and he already knows that he was there, and he knows that he was the inspiration for me getting into Stormcast.
Yep.
And building around the Protectors like that.
Good player. We had a great game, and a nice guy to talk to, and a good list builder. Had really sound theory behind all of his choices, and it was fun to talk to him about it.
Yep. Shout out to the Tabletop and Beyond podcast. Moving on. What do we have here?
On the
recent projects.
Yeah, really all the hobbying I've gotten to do lately is I'm still in the building phase on my total conversion Chaos Dwarves, but the actual band that's table ready, I finally got Kharadron Overlords finished. That's my list. It's 2 heavy weapons, a bunch of privateers, an admiral, and a mizzen master. And painted up and I think they came out okay. And I think the list is probably pretty good. There's definitely, obviously, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but a really good KO list. I don't know if this is it, but
I
um,
I
I think it's
depending on your loadouts, I think you either accidentally or just absorbed the good list and built the good list.
Yeah, I think the piece that I added that I either picked up and didn't know, like subconsciously picked it up or came up with independently that I thought was a really good fit for the list was the Arknaut Admiral. I like what he brings to the table. He can, if people charge your Grunstock mortar, the Arknaut Admiral can both stand back and shoot with the rest of your guys and also like discourage units from moving up because he hits very well in melee. So and he's relatively cheap and he brings fight for profit. So it was kind of like it crossed a lot of um, crossed off a lot of things I was looking for in that slot. So it slots in there real well.
And what we got on the right, Dave?
Yeah, that is my new Varangard, built almost entirely out of the Turnus box. That is a spare Varangard like axe in his hand. Eternus does not come with that axe. It does come with a larger axe for him, and then I believe the Chaos Lord has the hammer, so you can use that. But I wanted the axe, so. And then the base you're gonna also have to swap out if you get an Eternus box because it only comes with the larger demonic mount base. But I think it came together pretty well. Looks very Vanguard-ish as it should. I
Looks very
thought
chaosy.
yeah, chaosy. Needed some color, so I decided that the mount was blessed by corn. If you know the lore at all on Varanguards, they're 100% loyal to Archaon, but also they have ascended from the rank, so it is still thematic for them to have some background of various Nurgle or Corn or whatever Chaos God.
Yeah, I believe in Big Hammer. You can give them marks too.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I
yeah,
love the
I think it came out pretty well.
I love how the teeth the mount has some chompers on it.
Yeah. Those
Yeah,
are
yeah. It's a really good kit if you can pick it up. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than buying a Vanguard box. And for Warcry, you're probably only going to need one or two at the most.
two
Very,
Varanguard's dream that I have yet to
yeah,
realize. But
yeah.
I like the
So,
helmet on Eternus. It's a sweet chaos helmet. Yeah, just a cool
mhm.
model. Gives you a lot of cool
That is
pieces.
that one. I did go with the Chaos Lord head, which I thought was a little more standard Varanguardy.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very cool
I,
chaosy helmet.
I would like at some point for no other reason than just to do it, to pick up another kit and actually just build Eternus because he is a cool model.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. And then so hobby also includes organizing our models.
This is me trying to go down a couple of boxes of packed models. This is about 70%, I think, of my actual Warcry stuff, but that's pretty much everything I can put on the table. Um, Fire Slayers front and center for some reason. I don't know exactly why, but it's chaos on the left, and then it just kind of moves through the Grand Alliances. A little bit of everything. The one thing I'm really missing is a lot of the bespoke war bands, but my drive to for completion have every faction is it's moving along. Big
Impressive.
chunk of Nurgle stuff there on the left from my big Nurgle spree.
Some not safe for work 3D prints.
Yes. Yeah, the giant swamp lady with the bell there kind of to the center left was going to be my chaos like Cygor slash Gorgon. Um it's about the right height and size. And then I came across the Glotkin model and I just really like it, so I built that instead. So I'll probably find some use for it eventually. It could be a greater demon in Big Hammer or something.
All right. And then Zach's contributions here. I'll speak for him a little bit. So he so he's branching out a little bit. He's got a bust that's in progress. And I'm not a big fan of doing busts. But from what I understand, actually, it's coming along here. From what I understand, though, if you're into painting and you want to like expand your skills, like busts are a great way to do it, because you get to spend more time doing detail and stuff like that. And he was telling me that, so he zenithalled everything, just zenithal dry brush and contrast paint, and he's loving that. He's also working through a repaint on his Shattered Storm Vault, getting it all to a kind of a uniform black and gray scheme to match his starter terrain. So that's coming along pretty well too. I kind of like how that's looking.
I do too. I like the bust a lot. And
I like the bronze details.
Before we get into other news here, let's talk about a few other things we found around the internet. So this actually just popped up like yesterday. Someone posted it on Reddit. I don't know if you guys have gone to the site yet, warcrier.net.
I have not. I saw it in the group chat, but
It
I haven't
is
had a chance to check it out.
It is sweet.
Just a little bit. I didn't just the surface. I didn't get deep.
Yeah. So as you might know, if you there is no current like online resource that has everything you need. Like if you play Warhammer or Kill Team, if you play AOS, Kill Team or 40K, there's Wahapedia, but we don't have the equivalent for Warcry, unfortunately. I believe ServoScribe also does a Necromunda site, and he's also now finally started to kind of compile everything for Warcry onto warcrier.net. So go explore that.
Concept.
Yeah, it's great. I know he has everything from the compendium in there. I think someone let him know that the Bladeborn warbands are all good, all the underworld stuff. So I imagine he's going to be continuing to put all that stuff in there too. But it is great. Shout out to ServoScribe, just amazing work for the community. And the other page I wanted to highlight here, and I found this one. So Greenskins Gaming on YouTube. So it's hard doing battle reports. It's hard for me to kind of put together battle reports on our podcast. But what Greenskins Gaming does, he uploaded like 8 battle reports, and they're all like an hour long on his YouTube channel. So go check that out if you want some battle reports.
Yeah,
you want to just binge some battle reports.
I just absorb those every time I come across them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. I really like to see, because Warcry isn't one of the big tabletop games, it's really cool, these community building tools. When people reach out, people, build out Battle Scribe, create these kind of resources that really help, because it can be really frustrating for a new player to want to dive in and say like, okay, now where do I go to learn about it? And they're just like, you just got to kind of hunt around and pick the pieces and try to fit them together.
Warhammer community, and then start going through the archives.
Yes. You'll eventually find it all. So it's very cool. I really think it's great when people create these tools for the community.
Yeah. And admittedly, like even like our channel isn't necessarily like a beginner channel either, right? Because we just go straight in, deep into stats and analysis and stuff like that. So I wouldn't even claim that we're like a great beginner channel.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that I would have much. I don't think I would be a good teacher of this game to a brand new player. So I appreciate the people that are, because that is important, and the people who are good at that at really help grow the community, and that's important.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Also, a few weeks ago, we had a lot of activity. Someone accidentally got the wrong stuff in their box. Remember this? And then people stopped kind of talking about it, I guess. But I believe we figured out that this is going to be the Nightmare Quest box. Flesh Eater Courts versus Stormcast.
Hey, more Stormcast. That's fun. But no, but seriously, Flesh Eater Courts, that's cool. One, because it's a really cool faction, like just lore wise. It's just maybe not maximum Games Workshop, but like right up there with like having like insane roving cannibal hordes is very that grim dark fantasy stuff that they do well. But also they could use some help with their both the range of models and the models themselves, both of which are pretty old. So seeing support for them is cool.
Absolutely. You never have too many vampires, right?
Well, yeah, and Flesh Eater Courts literally have like I don't know how many models. I forget how many is in their range, but it's not a lot. It's they literally all have the word crypt in front of them. So
right. It looks pretty shallow if you look at the Warcry stats. There's like one page, you're like, oh, there's nothing you can do with this. When actually turns out they're actually fairly deep for having
I mean there's a lot.
Units.
They have a lot of interesting synergies built into them that you can kind of go in a couple of different directions. But your ghouls aren't super exciting, and they don't really have the models are kind of samey, So yeah, just different poses, different any kind of focus on the faction is cool. To show that like Games Workshop is still interested in them as a faction, and I really like the Stormcast stuff.
Yeah, there's also a ghoul baboon too.
Yeah, that's definitely worth noting. But yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I don't think the Stormcast sculpts look bad. There's some cool terrain. There's some temple terrain. I believe it's a reworked Realm Shaper engine or a repurposed one with some additional sprues. That's what the internet detectives were all over this for a day, and then once we figured out everything, people stopped talking about it.
Yeah, but pretty cool to see. The Stormcast are very Stormcasty, but cool. I mean, I think they look nice as far as Stormcast go, and I do like the jungly Aztec-y stuff. So,
yep,
cool box.
I like
hopefully
a building because we haven't gotten a lot of buildings lately.
This is
also true. Yeah, that's true. The Palisades. There's Palisades in their most recent box, and those are amazing. But yeah, apart from that, it's just been we've been getting a lot of trees.
Yes. A lot of trees and a lot of like walkways.
But yeah, that's not the only leak. Also, it looks like we're going to have an upcoming product called Crypt of Blood.
Yes.
And so what this looks like is, I thought it was a Bladeborn thing at first, like a direct to Barnes and Noble sort of game with two teams, with two pre-made teams. But here you also get a sprue of terrain, and the person who had this tryord on Reddit had some more pictures, and this is a full up Warcry box, it looks like, to kind of teach you the game. And so what I think this is going to be is your Warcry starter set, and it's going to come in at $99 US, similar to like the Kill Team starter set. It has a paper mat with some very, very sparse terrain, and enough to get you started playing the game.
Yeah,
so now
if nothing else, it's a way to keep Xandire's Truth Seekers and the Crimson Court in print and available, which are both kind of two cool sources of decent units and cool models. So keeping those available is a plus.
And any way you can get people into the game at a lower price point is also a good thing. It's a big ask to be like, well, yes, if you'd like to get started with the starter set, here's, it's $180.
$180, Yep. So this gets you in. Also worth noting, in the cards, so one of the abilities changed. I think one of the cursed, I can't remember, one of the Crimson Court abilities changed, I think, as well. I think it was one of them. And then also Enias Halfborn, his cost changed a little bit too. So this might be a very interesting precedent for, I think there might be some other guys whose costs change as well for the Crimson Court. But the Bladeborn, remember we chatted about this last time, some of the Bladeborn fighters, if their old points values don't quite make sense, they're either overcosted or undercosted. If there's like a balance pass on recosting all the Bladeborn, again, that just gets everything all kind of like, on the same level playing field, which would be great.
Yeah, agreed. And
Yeah.
again, honestly,
Give me my reasonably costed Dower Kragan.
that's
Yeah.
the dream. The dream is still alive.
Just give it to me.
Okay, but now you guys ready to talk about Adepticon?
Yes. Let's talk about list. I'll talk about list until 3:00 in the morning. Let's go.
Well, first you got to know what they even played. So I think they had 30 players for this. They played 4 match play missions. Well, a couple. So it's 2 Rumble Pack and then 2 core book ones. The first one they played is Power Struggle. So there's 4 objectives, and you're just simply trying to take objectives, and the points values for the objectives go up each turn. So pretty straightforward objective mission there. And even though this is from the Rumble Pack, I don't believe there are any secondaries. And then next they played Reaper, and we all know Reaper. That's one of my favorite ones to teach. And then next they played Loot and Pillage. So there's 3 objectives, and it's a treasure mission, but the treasures aren't just sitting out there, right? You have to get to an objective, you have to spend an action, and then you can start carrying the treasure around. And then
Is that the one there's also multiple treasures per loot?
yes, you can loot each objective twice. So there's a total of 6 treasures in play, potentially. So I was chatting with some folks after the narrative tournament, or on Saturday, and the topic of treasure missions came up. And I think actually, out of all of the treasure missions that are out there, I think Loot and Pillage is the one that people like the most. So if you're doing a tournament pack, I would include this one as your treasure mission. So important to know. And we'll actually try some of these tomorrow, since we're going to be practicing Rumble Pack missions.
Yeah, I'm my Rumble Pack knowledge is all on paper. I don't have any hands-on experience with them, so it's all theory at this point.
Yeah,
but of course we have results from this tournament that can help us, kind of parse that theory out into fact.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we played a few last time, but you couldn't make it. But yeah, trust me, like once you play one of these missions like once or twice, you'll kind of get it. And it really, like, for me, I didn't get them either until I like had played them once or twice, and I was like, okay, yep, I see how this is going.
Honestly, uniformly, there's some of the better missions that GW has done. Honestly.
Oh, there's one that's really bad though. There's one where you can burn objectives.
Well, there's always one that's really bad.
Which one?
One of the Rumble Pack missions, you can raise the objectives. You can just burn them to the ground, and no one can score them anymore if you've controlled them the previous turn. That's a bad one. No one likes that one because you can just completely shut people out of the game.
Right.
Like win the game on turn 2, essentially. Like get so far ahead that they'll never catch up.
Yeah, and it's one of those missions. It's just once you figure out how. I think it's one of those where it's a solved puzzle, right? Like it's a known factor how to win that mission type, which is fine. But some of the missions are a little more complex and have a little more fluidity, and some of them are just like, if you know this plan and execute it correctly, it is the winning strategy. And that's one of the ones that I think has like a known winning strategy.
Yeah. And not that that's a problem. It's just that it becomes completely uninteractive.
Yes. If both players know how to play it, it just becomes a matter of like winning initiative on critical turns and rolling enough to keep up. The strategic element of it is pre-scripted.
Yeah. And then finally they ended with ley lines. I don't think we've done ley lines in a while, but this is the one where you have 5 objectives. 1 starts awakened, and then each turn the player who did not have initiative can pick one to wake it up.
Yeah, it's sort of the opposite. What's the one where you start with objectives and then you remove them? It's like the
Hidden Vault.
inverse. Yeah,
Hidden
hidden vault.
Vault.
It's the inverse of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's also neat that each of these, well, loot and pillage, you look at the you score up at the end of the game, but ley lines is one um, where you're still scoring each turn.
Yeah, I tend to like the ability to score points each turn type missions. But this is long story short, I think this is a good mission pack. I think
Yeah.
it's nice and diverse. It shows good representations of kind of each archetype of mission. So good balanced mission pack.
Yeah. If I had to run a tournament tomorrow, I would probably just do these four in this order and just go like that.
Fix that. Yep.
And I would even go so far as to advertise it, like, okay, this is the pack, these are the four we're doing. Go to town, figure out what you want to do. But probably one of the most powerful things you can be doing that will win any of these missions would be to bring a Chimera.
All right. So the obvious caveat out of the way, if you want in-depth information about this list, you can certainly check in with the guy who played it, which is Dan. Great guy, great player, obviously, and of course the proprietor of the Salty Sea Warcry channel, which we talk about on this channel a lot, and a lot more information about this list from its pilot is available there. But with that said, some interesting things going on here. Obviously, I think, and we talked about this a little bit before, is this is one, if you're looking to do one of the most objectively powerful things you can do in Warcry, this is like one of those things, right? Get the Chimera on the board with enough backup models that you're not buried by activations, and let the Chimera do its thing. And this is a great way to execute that. Plague Bearers are really, really good. Sloppity Bile Piper is like fine as a leader. It's not amazing, but it's fine. Dan in his video said that it performed well, getting his Nurglings around the board versus Plague Bearers. And then the kind of new tech in this list is the Nurglings. Just to have another relatively fast unit. It's got 20 wounds. It moves 5, has a bunch of attacks. It probably outperforms 2 Plague Bearers, for its points in a lot of different situations. It's just sort of another angle of attack the list has. So that's a relatively recent innovation that Dan had.
Yeah, he said the reason he wanted that was because, so it one of the Achilles heels that the list has is if the Chimera comes on turn 2, you're a little bit behind, and then also everything else is slow. And if there's a mission where you need someone fast on the board, like Nurglings do have like a movement 5, right?
Yeah, they're quick.
Yeah, relatively speaking. So you give up a model in order to get access to a little bit of speed there. So you could spam and get a few more models, but he chose to have a little bit more balance and just a touch more speed.
Yeah. For the list I was going to bring, would be this exact list, except split the Nurglings into 2 Plague Bearers, have 9 models. That was the list that I thought was probably the best list, and I think the Nurglings were a great innovation to the list and add a lot.
You would run Sloppity and not Plaguebringer?
The points don't work with a Plaguebringer. The points are nice and clean with Sloppity, Plague Bearers, and a Chimera. It's hard to fit the Plague in there. Yeah, it's a points thing. I don't know that you need and we can talk about this later as well, but one of the first things I did with my Terrorgeist list with all of the Graveguard and stuff in it was, after playing it a couple of times, cut the movement buff guy, because it just feels like you have time. If you have enough models, you can get around the board okay without it.
Yep.
So
it's also a triple.
Yeah, and you want, obviously, generally speaking, you want to be using a triple is a big opportunity cost in a list with the Chimera triple that you really want to be using all the time. So there's pros and cons there. For me, it was primarily a points efficiency thing to put the Sloppity in there. But obviously, I think this list is really, really good. I think that the Nurglings are an upgrade. And I think if I were to run a major tournament tomorrow, I would run this exact list with the Nurglings in it. And I think if you're looking to play in a large tournament, have a plan for it. I think this list is really good.
So the other thing that Dan said in his report when talking about this was that the Chimera is broken at any cost. Like, what do you guys think about that statement?
I think that when you make an absolute statement like that, obviously you can pick it apart. Like, for example, would it win a lot of games if it was 1,000 points? No, I don't think that it would. But I agree with his statement that that stat line is impossible to point
Yes.
correctly for the game. It puts all of its investment points into the most high impact stats, throws on an insane ability, and then just lets it run wild. It's
Right.
not good for the game. You could probably make it 600 points, and I imagine you could still win tournaments with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to use a Magic analogy, there's an old question, an old Magic card design question. Like, if you had a card that said target player loses the game, or target player just win the game, you win the game, what is the appropriate cost of that card? And the correct answer is there is no appropriate cost for that card because it's inappropriately costed at any cost.
Right.
Yes, it just breaks the idea of it attacks the game from an angle that we don't have good costing metrics for.
Mhm.
And if I was going to play a major tournament, I'd play it. Because if I was going to play a major tournament, I would want to win that tournament, and I think that playing a Chimera list backed up with efficient chaff is a very good way to do that. But I don't think it's necessarily good for the game at this, even post nerf. Pre nerf, it was absurd. Post nerf, it's still not healthy. And
Right.
I agree with his assessment that pointing it is an impossible challenge.
Now, here's another question, rhetorical question. Dan did not address this one. The Chimera, so the Chimera potentially busted at any cost. You might be a target for you. Hey, just say get rid of it, get it out of the game, ban it. What about the other monsters?
His statement was the non-flying monsters are unplayable post nerf. And I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that we've seen enough people running them. I think
Yeah, so they're unplayable since they don't have the mobility. So that leaves you with like what, Terrorgeist potentially.
Terrorgeist, the 3 flying monsters are the Chimera, the Terrorgeist, and the Zombie Dragon. Terrorgeist is really expensive. It has 50 wounds, which I like a lot. But I like the Terrorgeist. I think that you can still make really good lists with the Terrorgeist. I think an interesting way to look at this problem for me isn't that the monsters and their point costs are the issue. It's the fact that there are a lot of factions that can surround them with 40 and 50 point chaff and still get a decent amount of models on the board. You combine those two things, and that's where you have a problem. Stormcast would have a difficult time playing a Kuribidus or a War Hydra, like even pre-nerf. It's just you can't get enough bodies around it, right? It's a perfect storm here where Plague Bearers are outrageously points efficient at 50 points, and you can still fit 8 models in here with a 515 point centerpiece. Like, that's not good for the game. The trade-off should be, if you're going to play a 515 point model, that you are strapped for activations, right? You're not. You're keeping pace with activations.
Yeah. My question is, Chimera aside, if Dragon Maul is fixed, what does that make monsters?
I think it makes most of the non-flying monsters very, very bad. I think most of the non-flying monsters are Dragon Ball platforms because it increases their reach and their their threat radius so much when they can be so hemmed in by terrain. That without that ability to do that, that you would need to be able to fly.
Yeah.
As
Okay.
of right now, I think that I would love to see a lot of testing, and I have some lists that I want to test with the Cygor still to throw rocks. Other than that, I don't know. I don't have enough experience with monsters post nerf. I think the Terrorgeist is still really defensible. I think the Chimera is obviously still defensible. I think the Cygor is potentially good. But a lot of those corner cases pre-nerf where you could say like, oh, I can slot in a Chaos Gargant or a Dankhold Trogoth, one of the really cheap monsters, just to like take a corner of the board and make it a no-go zone because of Dragon Maul for a couple hundred points. Now they're so expensive that maybe you can't do that anymore. I think that's probably a reasonable take, but I haven't tested it, so that's just purely theoretical.
Yeah. Well, let's try to make a point to kind of like get at least one monster game in, one reasonable
I
monster
have a
game.
whole tub full of monsters that I'm bringing.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask this is, what do I do locally here? Obviously the Chimera is still gone. Do we let the rest of the monsters out of jail, so to speak, locally? Is that going to be good for the local scene?
It depends. It depends on what you want to get out of it. If you want it to be a something that people can take that experience and go on to bigger tournaments with, you want to make sure that the game they're playing is most closely aligned with those. If you want to grow new player experience, you probably don't play monsters at all.
I agree.
That's me. I think
Yeah.
that even bad monsters will, against a player that does not know how to play the game at a reasonably high level, will wreck them just by putting so much firepower in one spot. But I don't know. We'll have to, that's something that will probably evolve as we test, I think.
So for those that are listening to this on the podcast, you ran Dan Herrera, aka the Salty Sea, won the tournament with Chimera, a sloppy Biopiper, Nurglings, and 5 Plague Bearers. 1,000 points, 8 models. Narrating that for the podcast listeners there. As always, the best place to get our content is going to be the YouTube channel. That way you can see the hobby updates and you can see the stuff that we're talking about.
All right. I think that's that list. There's nuance to playing it. Your Plague Bearers are slow. They don't hit particularly hard, but they're relatively tanky for their points cost and can really pounce on objectives. There's definitely some skill involved to playing it, but from a list building perspective, it's the scariest model in the game, surrounded by efficient chaff.
Yeah.
And I mean, we knew it was going to be. We knew it was a strong, known quantity going into this as well.
Yes.
And still is.
Absolutely. Nothing's changed. This is the list to beat.
Another strong list to beat. Destruction Soup. Peter Mercencabbage. Peter has kind of re-perfected his Gloomspite Gits list now. We'll see this again here, but he's currently running a Bounder boss, an Auric Mega boss, a Bolt Boy boss for some range out of the Cruel Boys, and then he's also bringing in some models from Underworlds. Snurk Sourtongue is back. We knew he'd be back. Also Prague Veneta from Zarbag's Gits. 2 Stabas with Net and a Brew Git.
So here's something worth. This kind of goes back to my previous point. This list is also 8 models and does not have a 515 point model, right? That's the difference between spamming that 50 point chaff model and playing these mid-range models. Cool tech in this list. I think it's kind of out there, kind of as a known quantity, that if you're worried about Brugets or other buff lords, The Bolt Boy boss is buff allies that bring in like movement buffs and that kind of thing. The Bolt Boy boss is a pretty good assassin for low wound models with its ability to crit. If it doesn't move, it can burn a double to crit on force, and deal 4 damage per hit at a pretty good range. So it's good at popping those kind of models, and I think that's really worth looking at in your destruction soup lists because Brugits aren't going anywhere. And the Bolt Boy boss can definitely, it's hard to hide a Brugit from it and still keep it like in the fray where it can actually use its ability. So that's cool. I like that. Snark Sour Tongue is nutty. Brugit.
Prog the Netta.
Yeah.
Prog, so if you're playing Gloomspite Gets, before you run any net stabbers with nets, you take Prog the Netta because he's cheaper, tougher, just almost strictly superior.
Yes. That's a takeaway. If you're that, and that's one of those things. It's kind of a shame because like that's an Underworlds box that can be hard to track down. But like, if you're playing them, if you're going to play Nettas, you got to take Prog, or you're giving up value.
Or proxy Prog at least.
Yes, I mean he's just a Netta. He's not doing anything fancy. The Orc Mega Boss, pretty point efficient, just chopper. Puts out a lot of damage. Snark, very, very squishy, but good damage, good target for the Brugit as well.
So the folks that have played against Peter, so he has a certain way that he deploys them where he can he has the group that has Snark. I can't describe it. I heard someone else describe it though, but there's positioning where like Snark is protected. There's like no way to really engage Snark. He's gonna be body blocked by like a couple other guys, and then Snark can just do his work. So Peter does know how to play it. He has a lot of experience playing Snark since 1.0.
Is help me out here. Is Peter the Gits player from Gen Con?
Peter took second place at Gen Con.
I played him in the finals.
The same guy. Yep.
And it was very, very tight and went down to the very last round. And this was with fully powered 1.0 spiders. And that list was absolutely absurd. And we went down to the very, very last activation of the last round for that. He's a very, very good Gits player. So if you're looking to play Gits competitively, I would start kind of from his list and go from there. But you have to be careful with Snark, like we were talking about. He puts out a ton of damage for his points, but he is very squishy. But yeah, this is a really nice, well-rounded list. It's got speed, it's got heavy hitting power, it's got some nets, it's got range. Yeah, I like the list a lot. Obviously, Destruction Soup is a very deep list, right? Destruction has a lot of good models, and when you're just mashing them all together, there's a million different ways to build it, but this would be where I would start.
All right. Next up, Justin Orton, 3-1. Justin might have broken the format again, potentially. So this time he played an Ogre Maw Tribes, brought 2 Gut Lords, 2 Brugits, and then a supporting cast. So 2 big hammers and 2 big, hugely buffed hammers.
I was gonna say, by big hammers, we mean like some of the biggest hammers you can actually take.
Yes.
Yeah. Gut Lords are absurd, especially in 2.0 where they received a significant buff over the 1.0 variant. They received like a whole nother attack. Like
3 attacks. Yeah, 3 attacks, buff. Strength 6, 5-10 damage profile.
Yes, and when a Brugit is buffing that up, they can basically be a Chimera in combat. Because the Chimera's attack profile, of course, is 6, 5-10. At 280 points.
Yeah, so he built this list, knowing that Nurgle Chimera was a known quantity and having tested against it. the whole Gut Lord Brugit combo is kind of intended to combat chimeras.
God
And-
Lords are good at bracketing monsters.
Yep, and what happened in their game in the finals, Justin had a play set up where he was going to try to double bracket the chimera and whiffed on it. So those things happen, and wound up losing the game because of it.
Yep. Because you do have to make an investment in that, right? Like a Gut Lord, effective as it is in combat, is 280 points, and buffing it from the Brugit does cost dice.
Yep.
So it's not like the Gut Lord can just wander around and kill. You do have to set this up to get maximum value out of it. You have to think ahead, you have to position well, protect your Brugits, spend your dice wisely. But if you do that, the Gut Lord is obviously just like an insane mega blender.
So the supporting cast is worth mentioning here as well.
Agreed.
So you have Shriek from Black Powder Buccaneers, and then you're also bringing in Legged and Thwack, Quiv, and Bushwhacka, and then just one regular Noblar.
Right, because you ran out of better Noblars.
Yeah.
But
those other Noblars have a couple more wounds, like 8 wounds as opposed to like the 6 on the Noblar.
Or then there's Bushwhacka, which is just 5 points cheaper, plus has an ability. He could have spent the 5 points to get a regular Noblar in there, but took Bushwhacka instead. He does have a trap laying ability that is halfway decent if you get it in the right spot. Quiv, without Hrothgorn to buff, Quiv is just like a pokey Noblar, but still has advantages there. So
now the other thing to keep in mind is Shriek. So I was wondering this because I played him Sunday night. So after everyone had sort of left the convention and stuff like that, I went and grabbed dinner with Justin and we played a friendly game. It actually was a friendly game, but it was like a 2-hour chess match. And I was wondering why pay 100 points for a bird? Well, turns out, assuming the bird doesn't die,
which is
assuming it doesn't die, or you can keep it out of combat, having access to that 10-inch flyer makes a difference. It was like running around. We were playing one of the objective missions, and he was running around like nabbing objectives and recapturing them. It was I did not kill Shriek until like I think at the very end, and it was very, very annoying. So the 100 points, you might not seem like it. The 100 points was absolutely worth it.
Yeah, that's the thing is, if you take a long time looking at, you build your armies out of efficiency, which is a good way to do it, looking at spreadsheets and coming up with the most efficient models. But sometimes you have a role that needs to be filled. Shriek is not an efficient model, but it is an extremely effective role player in a list that needed some speed. And I think it's a really interesting move to slot it in there. Because it is just on the surface not a good model, like point for point, but it does something that you need done at a lower cost than bringing in like a hopper boss, which would be another 10-inch destruction, flyer, but at a significantly higher cost.
Yeah. So this list absolutely terrifying to play against. The fully buffed Gut Lords, really scary. I played.
Like just burst the Gut Lords down, right? Their toughness 5, 32 wounds.
When I played against them, I tried to just completely avoid them.
Yes.
And just make them a completely, just treat them like a no-go zone. I was playing them on an objective mission, and I was trying to burn down. I was just playing my Skaven Rat Ogre list, and I was trying to burn down as many of his small guys as possible to kind of equalize the activation count. Kill a Brugit when I can. And it was actually very close. Like he wound up edging me out by 1 point at the end of that game.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway from this list that Justin did to it, obviously Brugit plus big destruction bruisers a known quantity going into this event. Double Gut Lord is not something I saw a lot of people discussing. It's a lot harder to avoid the Gut Lord completely when there's 2 of them. They have a 2-inch range they can use on the maw path to kind of dart the board. It's a lot harder to avoid than 1 Gut Lord or 1, whatever Iron Jaws model you want to use, or whatever other big bruiser you could bring in. Having two of them, both at the 2-inch range, can cover a lot of board.
Yep. Oh, the one other thing that Justin had noticed, I'm going to flip back to the deployments here. So in a lot of these missions here, the objectives are very close to each other. Like look at Power Struggle, look at Ley Lines. You can cover a lot. You can cover 3 objectives with a Gut Lord, or all 4 objectives, like, and have them within the threat radius of the Gut Lord.
Absolutely. That's
and
good noticing and good list building to the missions.
well, we didn't know that these were the missions, but it turned out that yes, that he was not punished for having just 2 giant hammers in this case. Where normally you would probably want to have, ideally, a lot of folks are doing 3 large hammers.
Yeah.
So keeping on going here, we have Flesh Eater Courts, Kyle Smith. Kyle, I believe Kyle was one of the 2 champions from the competitive tournaments last year as well. So he knows what he's doing. So he ran the Vargulf Courtier, an Abhorrent Ghoul King, 2 Crypt Horrors, and 3 Crypt Ghouls. 985 points, 7 models.
Big takeaways here. We talked earlier that there are a couple of different ways to build Flesh Eater Courts. This is kind of doing 2 of them at once. It's a Crypt Horror list. So it's not just Crypt Horror, it's a Chosen of the King list. Which if you're watching this, we have up on the card here. But if you have either an Abhorrent Ghoul King or an Abhorrent Archregent and a Crypt Horror, the Crypt Horrors have for a double a really good combat buff if they're within 6 inches of one of those 2 leader models. And so that's definitely it's a good synergistic way to build a model, build a warband. They're quick. That double lets them put out a lot of damage on demand for just a double. Another way to build them is building around the big heavy duty flyers. And here we see one of the really big ones, the Vargulf Courtier. So this list has both. The Courtier is nutty, does a lot of damage. It's very, very tanky. Also can do some high damage on demand.
Right. The Berserk Rage on the Vargulf Courtier is a triple. So now you're not fighting. You have triples and doubles. They're not fighting with each other.
Yep. And the other thing is this warband is very fast. Very fast. The Crypt
Horrors, if you check out their stats, 6 movement. Modest damage, 4424 attack profile, 28 wounds at 185. So fairly affordable, but then they go up to 6424 if you happen to pop Chosen of the King.
Yeah, so you have a little bit of 28 wounds is pretty solid for a fast model like this, backed up by the Vargulf Courtier. You have some good mobile, decently hard hitting, relatively high wound models. It's not doing anything insane in any one direction, but this is just a really solid synergistic list with some good speed.
Yep. Yeah. So after seeing this list, so I have 2 flayers built, 2 flying guys, and 1 Crypt Horror. And so I was like, well, shoot, I need another Crypt Horror. And I almost bought a used one, but then I realized that actually what I also want some Vargoyles for Soulblight Gravelords. Paint them up different color, right? So they're Vargoyles and not flayers.
Yep.
And so I went. So I do have on order a Crypt Horror, or a box of Crypt Horrors that I can to build my second Crypt Horror there. And then I just realized today that, okay, I need a Ghoul King now too, or maybe I'll eventually get the Terrorgeist to get the Ghoul King. But yeah, so I have, my Flesh Eater Courts expansion is going to continue. That's probably on the short list for my projects, getting my Flesh Eater Courts updated for some of these lists we've seen now in 2.0. All right, next up.
Oh, I like this one.
Oops, All Troggoths by Michael Sansom. And actually, I met Michael. I hung out with him and the Dogs of Warcry guys. Shout out to the Dogs of Warcry crew who put on the narrative event on Friday as well. They're all great. And then Michael, also from Madison, another great guy. Hung out with him, super friendly. Yeah, Oops All Trogoths. So we've seen this concept before, and he performed with it here. So it's 330 points. Mollog the Mighty. 2 Rockgut Trogoths, a Fellwater Trogoth, and then filling out the list with a Brugit. There's the Brugit again, and of course, Prague the Netta. 6 models, 995 points. What do you think?
So, number one takeaway from this list to me, and I'm a guy that loves Mollog the Mighty. I have Mollog the Mighty painted up and ready to go. Compare him at 330 points to a Gut Lord at 280 points. He has 3 more wounds, 1 less attack, and the same damage profile. You are paying a lot of points for his abilities. A lot. Because you lose a whole attack and add 50 points.
Well, keep in mind, so even though what we're seeing here is a 2.0 mock-up of the card, Mollog is still pointed as a very unique 1.0 model.
This is true, but even then he was very similar to a Gut Lord, because back then a Gut Lord only had 2 attacks, so he had the exact same attack profile as a Gut Lord.
But I don't think it's a fair comparison here. This is obviously like a theme list.
Well, I'm looking at it from a competitive standpoint. I'm saying I'm getting into why you would take Mollog over the Gut Lord, even though it's 50 points more for an inferior statted model. So it's a fair comparison, because this list, you could build this exact same list with a Gut Lord in it. Literally, because the Trogoths are thralls for destruction. You just couldn't get Prague. But my point is that this could have been an Ogre's list with a Gut Lord, but it's not. It's a Mollog list. So what Mollog brings to the table is his ability to plant that zone of -1 attack. And you couple that with the fact that he has 35 wounds, and that the Trogoths have 28 wounds, all high toughness, and you actually have a very, very survivable warband, especially in that -1 attack zone by the Spite Shroom. I don't remember which one it is. That's an interesting way to play. You can advance forward and put down this zone, and then just have your Trogoth like rampage around in it, and they're going to be really hard to kill. And I think that's cool. If you're going for straight killiness, a Gut Lord's a better choice, but you can build this really thematic list and have a really interesting play style with it that's different than a lot of other destruction lists, because of that kind of zone control way they can play. And I think that's cool. And obviously the Brugit's really good here. Brugit's really good at pumping up Rockgut Trogoths and really good at pumping up Mollog.
Really good at pumping up Mollog, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really kind of like the secret sauce here, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's the thing that's the unique capabilities that Mollog brought in 1.0. I still like wasn't in love with, because that 2 attacks, but like Brugit solves that problem.
Yes, he does. And if Mollog is not in the place where you need to use that ability, a Rockgut Trogoth is a perfectly serviceable place to toss a Brugit activation for a turn or two, with another very good attack profile. So coolest, very tanky. That's the thing to take away from this list, is that Trogoths are hard to kill, Mollog's hard to kill, and the Brugit can put out some good burst damage. For only 6 models, to put up 2 wins and 2 draws, no losses, in a format that we were all kind of kicking around, like you want 7, 8, 9, 10 models. It goes to show you can win games with lists like this if you build them synergistically and play to their strengths.
Yeah, mathematically, 202 is the same as 3 and 1. Again, and then the breakers are kind of based on your majors and minors. But
Yeah.
I'm just capturing the overall record. And then finally, so to round out our top lists, 3-1 or better from Adepticon, we have Eric Oakland with KO. So he's running Endrin Master with Endrin Harness, a Mizzen Master, 2 Thunderers with Ether Cannons, an Endin Rigger with Rivet Gun and Saw, and he's got 4 Arcanauts with pistols, 1,000 points, and 9 models.
The big takeaway here, of course, and Warren also has it up on the card, is Fight for Profit. Fight for Profit is a nutty build-around triple from Kharadron Overlords that it's an AoE attack buff, which is not uncommon in this game. You know, a lot of leaders have AoE attack buffs, but
this is the only one that affects ranged.
It's the only one that affects range, and it can add 2 attacks under some very common circumstances if they're carrying a treasure or within 3 inches of an objective. And in games where you want your models most of the time is by the treasure, by the objectives. So you don't have to go out of your way to turn that ability on, right? Something interesting, we talked a little bit earlier about how the objectives are close together and how you can cover them with a 2-inch range on the Gut Lord. You can cover them when all your models shoot. Not all of them. The Engine Master doesn't. But when the rest of 8 of your models shoot, you can park them on one objective and pour a withering amount of fire onto the other objective with Fight for Profit and make it really hard to hold that other objective while you're scoring points on a different objective. That's very efficient. You're getting a lot of efficiency out of your models that way.
So a few of the common things we're kind of seeing now in all these KO lists, right? So we're seeing a lot of the Mizzen Master. Salty ran the Mizzen Master in his Nova list. We've seen Mizzen Master in a few other KO lists. So it's glassy at 20 wounds. But
they all are, yeah. All of the flyers are kind of glassy that way.
But for 250 points, it's the glassiest. But still very common to use, and also has the mobility to run around and the hero rune mark to kind of give you Fight for Profit where you need it. And then the other thing here is the Aether Cannon, right? The range profile on the Aether Cannon is just 1 attack, strength 5, 510. So you're building around Fight for Profit there with 2 Aether Cannons and 2 sources of Fight for Profit.
Yes.
The Endin Rigger with the Rivet Gun and Saw is another like mid-range flyer, just a cheaper flyer, now with the hero rune mark. So you have 2 heroes, you have 2 flyers. You got 4 just chaff guys with the pistols. And I should also mention that Eric, I believe, also came from Madison and also placed in Salty's tournament, not the one that we're going to cover here, but Salty's first tournament back in like January or February with this same list. So if you're going to start to play Kharadron Overlords, this is probably the place that I would start. I think your list, did you run 2 Aether Cannon, double Fight for Profit as well in yours?
I have an Aether Cannon and a Grunstock Mortar and double Fight for Profit. Yeah. The main difference in mine is that I have a split in my heavy weapons. The Grunstock Mortar is really good. It is really, really good at deleting mid-range or less models, like say 100 points or less off the board from the very first battle round. It's not quite as good with Fight for Profit, but it's just a really good model. And I have the Arcanaut Admiral instead of the Endrin Master. I like the Arcanaut Admiral because he can shoot as well as has a similar attack melee profile. But the core idea is the same, right? Arcanauts privateers are really, really good. They're really, really efficient. Fight for Profit is really good when all your models shoot. Aether Cannons backed up with Fight for Profit are a real like existential threat to any model in the game. It does not take many hits or crits from an Aether Cannon to just absolutely wreck the vast majority of even high point models in the game at a decent distance. It's a cool list, and I think it's a very scary list, especially on these multi-objective, closely grouped objective missions where your Arcanauts can sit and shoot and sit and shoot all game and score points.
Yeah, with his performances, I'd say like this is like your stock list, or maybe like your list to beat if you're gonna like if you need to play test against Kharadron Overlords.
I agree 100%. I think you can tweak it to your personal taste, but start here for sure. There's some things you can say. If you want to shoot, the Engine Master with dirigible suit, the flying Engine Master is a better shooter than the Mizzen Master. The Mizzen Master, is 25 points cheaper, but has a worse shooting profile. So there's places, there's knobs you can tune, right? But the core strategy here is I think what Kharadron Overlords does well, and building to its strength. This is the bones to kind of hang that on.
All right. So before we go on and look at more lists, this kind of covers some takeaways from Adepticon. So we already kind of talked about the Chimera. Is it too strong? We won't belabor that point anymore. Here's something else though. So people are kind of up in arms a little bit about Brugit. The Brugit Gorger combo, Brugit Malag, just Brugit in general. What do you think about that? +3 attacks for a double.
It's obviously very, very good. It's nutty. Is it too good? The ability is really, really good. The model that it comes on is relatively fragile. I think
Brugit has 12 wounds.
That's
12 wounds for 70 points. It's you're not going to be taking that out in one shot typically.
It depends on what you're attacking it with, right? But
compared to other chaff profiles where you typically like your toughest chaff is like 10 wounds.
Sure, but I mean it's toughness 3, 12 wounds. I don't know. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit on the high side.
You could probably reasonably change it to half the value of the ability, like other abilities like this. It would actually at times make it better, but it would be way less consistent.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, getting a high double isn't too hard, but I don't know. I really don't know about that. I'm kind of asking just rhetorically. It's definitely one of the better things we've obviously know it's one of the best things you can be doing in the game right now is playing Brugits. Is it too good? I don't know. Because if it gets nerfed or brought down, right, then something else becomes the best thing, and then
I was going to
people are
say
going to complain about that.
To bring up another Magic comparison.
Necropotence.
Well, yeah.
Ban everything till Necropotence is good.
Then ban
Necropotence.
Right. Something has to be the best thing. Is Brugit, as far as being one of the best things to do, is Brugit a healthy best thing? I think it probably is relatively healthy. It's certainly a healthier best thing than Chimera being the best thing to do, right? Like that's a metagame warping direction to go. Brugit is just sort of like an efficient way to fight on an axis that we're already kind of fighting on. I err towards the side of it probably being okay, and there's ways to counterplay it, but we're gonna have to see.
Yeah. Another thing I kind of noticed when kind of putting this together, not just Brugit, but just attack buffs in general. You had Fight for Profit also being very strong.
Well, and this is something that we talked about.
Yeah, not that I'm calling for a Fight for Profit nerf.
Sure,
just
sure.
Like, things to do, things to build your warbands around.
Something that we talked about when we talked about the Varangard If you
Mhm.
move, pop, relentless killers,
Yep.
and attack, you have gotten functionally a free action on a double, right?
Right.
A Brugit on a double, adding 3 attacks to a model with 2 or 3 attacks to begin with, is a free action on a double, right?
Chosen King can do that. Vargolf Courtier Berserk does that too.
Fight for profit. If you affect a model, or even if you only hit one other model, but you're usually not, you're going to hit 2 or 3 other models with it. And add even +1 attack, you're getting a free activation worth of attack. So basically, long story short, is activations are good, and getting them for doubles or even triples
Yes.
is the best thing you can be doing, is getting more activations out of nothing but dice, not having to spend points.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a few points on that I was going to put together for another podcast as well. I haven't gotten those thoughts on paper yet, but you might hear from me on another cast talking about that exact same concept.
So I guess the takeaway here for me is, if you're looking to build competitive lists, look for those. It doesn't have to say gets an extra action to add an extra action worth
Of
of
value.
value, but look for those cases where you can get activations worth out of things that don't cost points.
Yep.
And
Like
that is
polls, like the poll, right? Dragon Maul or any other polls that we like, like Slaughter Priest,
yes,
effectively turn into effectively turn into an attack.
yes, that's exactly right. So those are efficiencies, and identifying those correctly and thinking of them in that way will help you build efficient and effective lists. That's my big takeaway. All the lists we're looking at here, not all of them, a lot of them, are built around that as a fundamental concept. Cheating on activations, basically getting more activations than if you have 9 models, they're getting more than 9 activations out of their list.
Couple other things. We'll see a few more examples here, but the return of Underworlds. We'll see a few more Underworlds here in the other list that we talk about, but it's cool to see Underworlds back and making an impact.
Yeah, very cool. I think Underworlds having Warcry rules is one of the best things they've done for the game. It's good in a lot of different directions at once. It's good for new players. It's good for existing players to expand their collections. It's good to add more interesting models to the game, because the Underworld models tend to be good. It's awesome. It took way too long to get this clarity from Games Workshop, but now that we have it, it's good to have.
Yeah, it's only good for the game.
And then another point, we'll see more of this here as we go throughout this. We're about halfway through, actually. We got more. But another thing is just cheap chaff, plague bearers, dwarves, that sort of thing. And we're going to see more of that as well. A lot more dwarves.
Another way to get that cheat on activations mentality is, if you are buying a cheap dwarf model for 60, 70, 80 points, and it takes your opponent
Two attack actions to take them out because they have
kill
12 wounds.
With a model that costs more than 60 points, you're way up on act. That's like virtual activation advantage, right? Again,
Yep.
it doesn't say anywhere in that interaction that somebody's up or down in activation, right? It's not like you're in activation, but you're up activations and your opponent is down activations.
That is a really good point I hadn't thought about. I generally think of just matchups, but not the actual effect of like getting virtual activation advantage from matchups. I do think about matchups all the time though, right? Like I don't match up chaff versus chaff. I match up one of my guys that's very efficient at murdering chaff with the opposing chaff models.
What does a Deathmaster cost?
185.
Costs 185 points. How often can it one shot a 5 toughness, 12 wound chaff model?
Less likely than you think.
So 185 points, you're paying 3 times more for that than I'm paying for my 60-point hammerer. Hammerer? No. The 60-point dwarf.
Yeah.
And
We got him. Yeah, we got him later here. 1 sec.
It's taken you 2 activations to delete it, right? Like there's Ironbreakers.
Ironbreaker.
Look at that stat line. Look at that. It's outrageous. It is offensive.
We were gonna talk about this later, but we can talk about this now, since the sub theme of this, if you hadn't noticed by the thumbnail, is dwarves everywhere.
So I guess I could belabor this point, and I could probably spend a whole podcast talking about it, but the scarce resource in Warcry, to me, when thinking about how to be as efficient as possible, it's not points. Everyone has the same amount of points, and you can get on a spreadsheet and find the most efficient models for your points, and that's a great way to go. But in the game, the thing you're always scrambling for is activations. Activations. You need activations to move on to objectives. You need activations to kill opposing models. You need activations to do anything.
Or just having first mover advantage. Yeah,
yes.
I feel that in 2.0 because I'm playing Skaven with 7 models, and I'm going up against bespoke warbands with 9 models and struggling because they have 9 models.
9 models. It's raw activate. It doesn't matter what the models are in this conversation. It's just they have more activations than you do. So the burden immediately shifts to you to do something about that, right?
Which fortunately I can usually do with rat ogres and such. But yes, but my first order of business in any game is typically to earn if I don't have activation advantage, try to get it, or lever or further widen the lead on activation advantage.
Yes.
And then usually I'll win the game after that.
That's the axis that you're scrambling over. And when you can build up virtual activation advantage by throwing out a wall of Ironbreakers and being like, have fun chewing through these, the effect is significant, and it cascades throughout the rest of the entire game, because your opponent, that you look, okay, I have 9 models, you have 9 models, cool. You come and kill my models. Wait, I just burned 6 activations and killed 2 models. Now it's like, that's great, but those activations are precious, and you're trying to burn out these 60-point models. It's look for those ways to gain those activations worth of value, I guess, is the takeaway here. And one of the ways to do that is to play cheap tanky chaff, and the best cheap tanky chaff in the game is these dwarves.
The Ironbreaker, 60 points, toughness 5, 12 wounds. We'll double back and talk about a couple of lists with the Ironbreakers, though. This concludes part 1 of our list review. We're going to take a short intermission here and come back and cover other lists from events leading up to Adepticon that follow a lot of the same concepts we've talked about. See you after the break.